Hey, let's get into it. One of the tensions that I think a lot of us carry is this gap between what we say we believe and what our lives actually show. It's sort of building off what we were talking about yesterday. It's not hypocrisy um, in the loud, obvious sense, but most of us aren't trying to fake anything. But it's this slow drift where belief becomes mostly just our words, mostly ideas, mostly just agreement. And we believe the right things and we affirm them. You defend them in a conversation, and yet sometimes the life that those beliefs are meant to produce, it feels thin. Compassion that never quite turns into action. It's concern that never quite becomes a sacrifice. And James wants to speak into that here in James 2. If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, be warmed and filled," without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. James, again, writing to Jewish Christians, pressed away from their homes, chased out. Um, Many of them are probably living close to the edge financially. Some are struggling just to survive. And inside the church, this pressure is starting to show. You have people with very little standing alongside people who have seemingly a lot more security. Earlier in this chapter, James confronts favoritism towards the wealthy, and now he shifts the focus on what happens when someone in the community is genuinely in need. And his example is just really practical. A brother or sister without adequate clothing and daily food. In the ancient world, that actually wasn't unusual. Day labor was unstable, unreliable, harvests failed. There were widows and orphans, displaced families. They often lived from they were one bad week often away from hunger. James imagines a response that it sounds very spiritual. Go in peace, be warm, and be filled. They're kind words. They're religious words, but nothing actually changes. And James ends the thought with this line that kind of lands like a hammer. Faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. That word dead is probably pretty important. James isn't saying that the faith is weak or immature. He's saying that it is lifeless. The kind of thing that might have an outward appearance of belief, but carries no living power inside of it. Throughout Scripture, living faith always moves. Think of the early church in Acts. They were sharing their possessions so no one among them had lacked for their daily needs. It was real, it was practical. Their faith wasn't abstract. It rearranged their lives and it opened up their hands. And really, that's probably James's point, is that real faith doesn't stay theoretical. It always presses outward into like a practical, tangible love. Not because we're trying to prove ourselves or earn something, because the life of Christ inside of us, this fruit, begins to reshape how we see people and what we do when we see a need. So there's this question that's worth kind of sitting with. Where has compassion in your life stayed mostly verbal? Where have you felt concern, but stopped the good intentions? Listen, not every need is ours to solve. None of us can meet all of them. But when God puts someone in front of you, a real person with a real practical need, what Jesus would call, I think, a neighbor, then living faith uh, has to look like movement. Maybe it's as simple as a phone call. Maybe it's a meal or an open home, time over coffee, a quiet act of generosity, really small things, but living things, kindness. Because faith that's truly taken root in our hearts eventually needs to show up in our hands. Wherever you find yourself, God goes with you today.